we want you to know.
The question of whether the United States government will shut down in late 2025, and particularly whether Democrats are to blame or are instead working to prevent such a shutdown, has become one of the most pressing issues in Washington, one that intertwines political strategy, historical precedent, and the raw mechanics of government funding in ways that highlight not only the ideological divide between Democrats and Republicans, but also the fragility of America's current political system, because at the heart of this debate lies a constitutional requirement that Congress must authorize appropriations for the government to function, and if that fails, government agencies close, federal workers go unpaid, and essential services ranging from air traffic control to national parks to food safety inspections are thrown into uncertainty, which in turn creates ripple effects across the economy and undermines public trust in institutions. So to fully understand the latest developments in September 2025, one must begin with the political context where Democrats currently control the Senate. The White House is led by President Joe Biden, and Republicans hold a slim but highly divided majority in the House, meaning that any funding bill requires a degree of compromise that has become almost impossible in the hyper-partisan climate. And as the end of the fiscal year approaches on September 30th, both parties are locked in negotiations over a continuing resolution and longer-term spending packages, with Democrats pushing for what they describe as responsible governance and the protection of social programs, climate initiatives, and federal worker stability, while Republicans, influenced heavily by their right-wing flank, are demanding sharp spending cuts, restrictions on immigration, and rollbacks of environmental regulations. And in this environment, Democrats are accused by their opponents of being unwilling to make concessions, which Republicans frame as leading the nation toward a shutdown. Yet Democrats argue the opposite, insisting that they are offering reasonable compromises and that it is Republican infighting, especially among hardline conservatives and the House Freedom Caucus, that threatens to collapse negotiations. And this finger-pointing is not new, but part of a long history in which government shutdowns are often weaponized as political blame games, as seen in 1995-96 when then-Speaker Newt Gingrich clashed with President Bill Clinton, in 2013 when Republicans fought President Obama over the Affordable Care Act, and in 2018-2019, when Donald Trump demanded border wall funding and forced the longest shutdown in U.S. history, all of which provide context for why Americans today are wary of yet another lapse in funding, because the costs are not merely symbolic but deeply material. As hundreds of thousands of federal employees would be furloughed or forced to work without pay, contractors would lose business, and ordinary citizens could face delays in tax refunds, passports, and access to services, while global markets would interpret a shutdown as a sign of dysfunction in the world's largest economy, undermining the credibility of U.S. Treasury securities at a time when America is already grappling with high debt levels, debates over interest rates, and competition with China. And in fact, economists warn that even a short shutdown could cost billions of dollars in lost productivity and confidence, which is why the Biden administration has been vocal in calling on Congress to pass a clean funding bill and avoid unnecessary brinkmanship, with White House officials warning that Democrats have no interest in staging a shutdown, seeing it as politically and economically reckless, whereas Republicans appear divided between moderates who want to avoid the political fallout and extremists who see shutdown threats as leverage to push through ideological goals. And this dynamic has created a narrative in the media where Democrats are portrayed either as guardians of government stability or as stubborn negotiators, depending on the outlet, with left-leaning media emphasizing the chaos within the Republican Party and right-leaning media accusing Democrats of overspending and refusing to compromise. And public opinion polls suggest that most Americans, regardless of party, dislike shutdowns and usually blame Congress as a whole, though historically Republicans have tended to take more of the blame, as was the case in 2013 and 2019, which explains why Democratic strategists are confident that if a shutdown happens, voters will punish Republicans in the 2026 midterms. Yet Republicans argue that Democrats' insistence on protecting funding for climate policies, student loan relief, and social programs is proof that they prioritize liberal agendas over basic governance. And this back and forth reflects not only partisan divides, but deeper structural problems in how the U.S. budget process has evolved. Because instead of passing 12 regular appropriations bills through regular order, Congress has increasingly relied on last-minute continuing resolutions and omnibus packages, which heighten the drama of potential shutdowns and give small factions outsized power. And in this context, Democrats' role is complex. They are not actively seeking a shutdown, but their refusal to concede to extreme cuts is what Republicans frame as the catalyst. While Democrats themselves argue that standing firm against such cuts is precisely their duty to protect vulnerable Americans and the long-term interests of the country, and one can see how this becomes not only a legislative fight, but a struggle over narrative as each party seeks to define the shutdown debate in terms favorable to them, with Democrats emphasizing stability, responsibility, and protection of services, while Republicans highlight fiscal responsibility, border security, and opposition to what they see as wasteful spending. And as the days tick down toward the funding deadline, negotiations continue behind closed doors, with reports of Democrats offering modest caps on discretionary spending, and Republicans divided on whether to accept them. And this tug-of-war has significant implications beyond just the budget, because a shutdown at this moment could weaken U.S. credibility abroad, especially as allies and rivals alike watch whether the United States can govern itself effectively and domestically. A shutdown could harm President Biden politically as he seeks to maintain confidence going into the 2026 election cycle, though Democrats argue that the contrast with Republican dysfunction will ultimately benefit them. And indeed, many experts point out that voters generally want compromise and stability rather than chaos, meaning that whichever party is seen as the most obstructionist could suffer. And while Democrats continue to push for a deal, Republicans' fractured caucus means that even if House leaders reach an agreement with the Senate and the White House, there is no guarantee it will pass, especially if a handful of hardliners refuse to go along, creating a situation where Democrats could ironically become the party defending institutional stability, while Republicans appear to be the ones pushing toward shutdown. And yet, because narratives are so contested, there remains a strong push from conservative voices to label Democrats as responsible for any closure, accusing them of being addicted to spending, refusing to address debt, and prioritizing progressive programs over bipartisan compromise. But the reality is that government shutdowns are never the responsibility of one party alone, since both chambers and the executive must participate in negotiations. And this complexity is why the current moment is so fraught, with financial markets, federal workers, and ordinary citizens anxiously watching. Because every day that passes without a deal increases uncertainty, and uncertainty is costly in itself. As businesses delay hiring, markets grow jittery, and international partners question the reliability of U.S. governance. And so the question of whether Democrats will shut down the government is in many ways misleading, since Democrats themselves argue they are trying to keep it open. But the broader political struggle means that even with their best intentions, they cannot unilaterally prevent a shutdown, as it takes both chambers to pass funding. And ultimately, whether the government shuts down will depend not only on Democrats, but on Republicans' ability to compromise, on the willingness of leaders to resist their extremes, and on whether the White House can maintain pressure while avoiding blame, making this one of the most dramatic tests of America's democratic system in recent memory.